Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
On Christmas Day, while I was cooking, I asked my parents, "Did any official documents arrive at the house?" They said yes, but we threw them in the trash. I froze. "Are you sure?" I asked. My father laughed, completely satisfied. "Absolutely." What I said next wiped the smile off their faces. Pale and shaking, they realized they had just destroyed the most important mail of my life. Those weren't just any documents. They were my medical school acceptance letters. The wooden spoon slipped from my hand and clattered against the kitchen floor as the gravity of their words hit me like a freight train. Steam rose from the turkey I had been basting, but I couldn't feel the heat anymore. Everything went cold. "Where exactly did you throw them?" I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible over the Christmas music playing softly in the background. My father. William chuckled from his recliner in the living room, his belly jiggling under his red flannel shirt. "Tom, you worry too much about mail. It was just junk anyway." Christmas cards from companies trying to sell us stuff. My mother, Sandra, looked up from her crossword puzzle, her reading glasses perched on the tip of her nose. "Honey, you know we don't need any more credit card offers or insurance nonsense cluttering up the house. I threw them right in the kitchen garbage this morning before starting the sweet potato casserole." The room started spinning. I gripped the granite countertop so hard my knuckles turned white. For 3 years, I had endured rejection after rejection from medical schools across the country. 3 cycles of applications, 3 rounds of heartbreak. But this year felt different. My MCAT scores had improved dramatically. My volunteer hours at Denver General Hospital had given me incredible clinical experience. My personal statement was the most honest, raw piece of writing I had ever produced. "Dad, those weren't advertisements," I said, my voice gaining strength as panic set in. "I've been waiting for responses from medical schools. Johns Hopkins, Harvard, University of Colorado, Mayo Clinic. I applied to 15 programs this cycle." William's laughter grew louder and more dismissive. "Medical school? Tom, you're 28 years old. When are you going to give up this ridiculous fantasy and join me in the plumbing business? I've been holding a position for you at Henderson Plumbing Solutions for 2 years now. Good, honest work, steady paycheck benefits." I rushed to the kitchen garbage can and yanked off the lid. Coffee grounds, eggshells, and wrapping paper from this morning's gift exchange created a disgusting mixture. But underneath, I could see torn pieces of white envelopes with official letterheads peeking through. "Sandra helped me understand something," I said, pulling out fragments of what appeared to be correspondence from academic institutions. "You saw official mail addressed to me and decided to throw it away without even asking." My mother set down her pencil and removed her glasses, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "Thomas, you've been obsessing over this doctor thing for years. It's not healthy. Your father and I are just trying to protect you from more disappointment." "Protect me." The words came out as a roar. I held up a torn piece of paper that clearly showed the Harvard Medical School logo. "You threw away mail from Harvard Medical School to protect me?" The color drained from both their faces. William's laughter stopped abruptly and Sandra's mouth fell open. "Now hold on," William said, standing up from his chair with less confidence than before. "You don't know what those letters said. They were probably more rejections anyway." I continued digging through the garbage, my hands shaking with adrenaline and fury. More pieces emerged. Mayo Clinic, University of Colorado School of Medicine, Johns Hopkins. Each torn fragment felt like a piece of my future being ripped away. "You had no right," I whispered, assembling the pieces like a jigsaw puzzle on the kitchen counter. "These weren't your decisions to make." Sandra approached cautiously as if I were a wild animal that might attack. "Sweetheart, we're your parents. We only want what's best for you. Medical school is so expensive, so competitive. The plumbing business is a sure thing." The front door opened with a burst of cold December air, and my 25-year-old sister Jessica walked in carrying presents and wearing her typical attitude of superiority. Her boyfriend Brandon followed behind both of them, laughing about something on her phone. "Well, what's going on in here?" Jessica asked, taking in the scene of me surrounded by garbage and torn mail. "Tom, why are you making such a mess on Christmas?" Mom and Dad threw away my medical school letters. I said, not looking up from the fragments I was desperately trying to piece together. Jessica rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh my God, are you still obsessing over that Tom? You've been rejected 3 times already. Take a hint. Not everyone is cut out to be a doctor." The betrayal felt complete now. My own sister, who I had supported through her community college marketing program, who I had helped with her car payments when she couldn't find work, was joining the chorus of family members telling me to abandon my dreams. "Jessica, stay out of this," I said through gritted teeth. "Actually, she has a point," William said, emboldened by his daughter's support. "Tom, you're not getting any younger. Your cousin Danny is making $60,000 a year in construction and he's only 26. Your cousin Marcus just bought a house at 24, working in electrical. Good, honest trades that actually help people. Medicine helps people too," I said, holding up what appeared to be part of an acceptance letter from University of Colorado. The partial text I could make out included the words, "Pleased to inform you," before the paper tore off. Sandra gasped, "Oh no. Oh, William, what if that was actually good news?" "Don't be ridiculous," William snapped, but his voice lacked conviction now. Medical schools don't accept people like us. We're working-class folks from Aurora. Tom's been living in a fantasy world since he started taking those science classes at Metro State. The kitchen fell silent, except for the soft humming of the refrigerator and distant Christmas carols from the radio. I stared at the incomplete puzzle of my future scattered across the counter, feeling completely alone despite being surrounded by family. "There's more, isn't there?" I asked quietly. "This isn't the first time you've thrown away my mail." The guilty exchange of glances between my parents confirmed my worst suspicions. This sabotage went deeper than just Christmas Day. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. William shifted his weight from foot to foot, his confident demeanor crumbling like a house of cards in a windstorm. Sandra busied herself wiping down already spotless counters, avoiding eye contact completely. "Answer me." I demanded, my voice carrying a new authority that surprised even myself. "How long has this been going on?" Jessica looked between our parents with growing confusion. "Mom, Dad, what's Tom talking about?" "Now just everybody calm down," William said, raising his hands as if trying to stop traffic. "We can discuss this like reasonable adults after we finish Christmas dinner. The whole family will be here soon." "The basement?" I said suddenly, remembering how my father had been unusually protective of his workshop area lately. "You've been hiding mail in the basement?" William's face went completely pale. "Tom, you're being paranoid. I think all this stress about medical school has affected your mental health." Without another word, I pushed past him and headed for the basement stairs. Behind me, I could hear Sandra pleading with Jessica to talk sense into your brother, while William's heavy footsteps followed me down the wooden steps. The basement smelled like sawdust and motor oil, familiar scents from countless childhood hours watching my father fix things. But now it felt like descending into enemy territory. I flipped on the overhead light and began searching through his workbench drawers. "Tom, stop this right now," William commanded. "You're invading my privacy." "Like you invaded mine." I shot back, pulling open the deep drawer where he kept important papers. Inside, beneath warranty information for various tools, I found a manila folder labeled Tom's Stuff. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were dozens of unopened envelopes addressed to me dating back nearly 2 years. Scholarship notifications from the Colorado Medical Foundation, interview invitations from residency programs, financial aid approvals I had desperately needed during my post-baccalaureate program. You've been stealing my mail for 2 years, I whispered, flipping through letter after letter that could have changed my life. 2 years. William came down the stairs slowly, his face a mixture of defiance and shame. I was protecting you from disappointment. Every time you got rejected, you'd mope around for weeks. Your mother and I couldn't stand watching you torture yourself. These aren't rejection letters, I said, holding up an unopened envelope from the National Merit Medical Scholarship Program. This is dated 18 months ago. Do you have any idea what missing this scholarship cost me? I had to take out additional loans for my entire post-baccalaureate program. Sandra's voice carried down from upstairs. William, bring Tom back up here. Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia just arrived with the twins. The sound of multiple car doors slamming confirmed that our extended family Christmas gathering was beginning. Perfect timing for my world to fall apart completely. Tom, listen to me, William said, stepping closer with his hands outstretched. Your Uncle Robert built a successful contracting business from nothing. Danny and Marcus are both doing well in the trades. There's no shame in honest work. There's also no shame in pursuing education, I replied, stuffing the hidden letters into my jacket pockets. But apparently, there's plenty of shame in having family members who sabotage your efforts. We climbed back upstairs to find the house filling with relatives. Uncle Robert, my father's younger brother, stood in the kitchen, wearing his signature denim shirt and work boots, examining the torn mail fragments still scattered across the counter. "What's all this mess about?" he asked with his typical bluntness. Aunt Patricia, always the peacemaker, tried to redirect attention to her twin sons. "Danny, Marcus, come say hello to your cousin Tom. How's the doctor studying going, honey?" The question hit like a slap across the face. I realized that my extended family had no idea about my actual academic achievements because my parents had been controlling the narrative for years. Actually, Aunt Patricia, I graduated summa cum laude from my post-baccalaureate program last spring. I said, watching my parents' faces turn red. I've been working as a research assistant at Denver General Hospital while applying to medical schools. Danny, the older twin by 12 minutes, snorted with laughter. Cousin, my buddy Jake, tried the whole medical school thing. Ended up $60,000 in debt and working at a pharmacy. Now he wishes he'd learned a trade like us. Marcus nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, Tom, you should see the houses Danny and I are building up in Thornton. Real satisfaction in creating something with your hands. I looked around the room at faces that should have represented love and support, but instead reflected judgment and dismissal. My own family had been actively working against my dreams while pretending to care about my well-being. Did you all know, I asked quietly, about Mom and Dad throwing away my mail? Uncle Robert shifted uncomfortably. Tom, your parents are just looking out for you. Sometimes families have to make tough decisions. Tough decisions. The words exploded out of me. They stole my mail. They hid scholarship opportunities and interview invitations. How is that looking out for me? Jessica, who had been unusually quiet, pulled out her phone and started recording. This is actually kind of fascinating from a psychology perspective. Tom's having like a total breakdown over some stupid letters. Stop recording me, I demanded. What? It's a free country, she replied with a smirk. Besides, this will be hilarious to show our friends. My brother, the wannabe doctor, having a Christmas meltdown. Aunt Patricia looked genuinely concerned now. Jessica, put your phone away. This isn't appropriate. Actually, Jessica continued, still filming, I think I'll post this on TikTok. Family drama at Christmas dinner. It'll probably go viral. The cruelty of my sister's words cut deeper than anything my parents had done. This wasn't just sabotage anymore. It was active humiliation documented for social media entertainment. William Saquon, Uncle Robert, said firmly, maybe you should explain to Tom why you've been so concerned about this medical school business. My father looked around the room at the expectant faces of his family, searching for support in his justification. Fine. You want the truth, Tom? We've been protecting you because we know this family. We know our place in the world. We're not the kind of people who become doctors. The statement hung in the air like toxic gas poisoning everything it touched. What kind of people do become doctors, Dad? I asked, my voice deadly calm. Rich people, connected people, people with advantages we never had. You're setting yourself up for heartbreak by reaching so far above your station. Sandra nodded vigorously. Your father's absolutely right, sweetheart. Look at the Hendersons down the street. Both their kids went to college, and now they're struggling with student loans while working jobs that don't even require degrees. So you decided to make my choices for me, I said, without even asking what I wanted. We're your parents, William replied. It's our job to guide you toward realistic goals. Danny and Marcus exchanged knowing looks. Tom, Danny said, we've actually been talking about you at family gatherings. We all think you'd be great in construction. Natural problem-solving skills good with your hands. You've been discussing my future behind my back at family gatherings? The betrayal kept expanding like ripples in a pond. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me photos of half-built houses. Look at this place we're working on in Lakewood. Custom home $2.5 million project. The satisfaction of building something this beautiful with your own skills beats sitting in some sterile medical office any day. I stared at my cousins, realizing that they genuinely believed they were offering me something better. Their perspective wasn't malicious, like my parents' sabotage, but it was just as dismissive of my actual dreams and abilities. What if I told you I said slowly that I actually love medicine, that I find deep satisfaction in understanding how the human body works, in helping people heal, in being part of something larger than myself. The room fell silent again. Even Jessica stopped recording, perhaps sensing that this moment carried more weight than her social media entertainment required. Tom. Aunt Patricia said gently, we all want you to be happy. But happiness comes from realistic expectations and steady work. Whose definition of realistic, I asked, because apparently my definition and yours are very different. Uncle Robert stepped forward with the authority of the family patriarch. Son, I've been in construction for 30 years. I've seen plenty of young men with big dreams crash and burn when they aimed too high. Your father and I are trying to save you from that pain. By destroying my opportunities before I even know what they are, William's patience finally snapped. Those letters probably contained more rejections anyway. How many times do you need to hear no before you accept reality? I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out one of the hidden letters from the basement. The return address clearly showed University of Colorado School of Medicine, and the envelope was thick enough to contain multiple pages. Only one way to find out, I said, tearing open the envelope that should have been delivered to me 6 weeks earlier. As I unfolded the letter, the room held its collective breath. The first words I saw were, "Congratulations, and pleased to offer you admission." The silence that followed was deafening. The acceptance letter trembled in my hands as I read the words that should have filled me with joy 6 weeks ago. Instead, I felt a crushing mixture of elation and rage. University of Colorado School of Medicine had not only accepted me, but offered me a position in their highly selective primary care track with significant financial assistance. Congratulations, Mr. Tom Bradley. I read aloud, my voice growing stronger with each word. We are pleased to offer you admission to the University of Colorado School of Medicine class of 2026. Based on your exceptional academic performance and commitment to underserved communities, you have been selected for our Primary Care Scholars Program, which includes a full tuition scholarship for all 4 years. The room erupted in chaos. Sandra gasped and covered her mouth with both hands. William's face turned an alarming shade of purple. Uncle Robert whistled low and long. Danny and Marcus stared at me, like I had suddenly sprouted wings. A full ride, Jessica whispered temporarily, forgetting to maintain her dismissive attitude. Tom, that's like $200,000. Keep reading, William said hoarsely. There's probably conditions or requirements that make it impossible. I continued reading, my confidence growing with each line. Your leadership experience as a research coordinator at Denver General Hospital, combined with your outstanding MCAT score of 518 and your undergraduate GPA of 3.96, made you a standout candidate among over 4,000 applicants. Aunt Patricia sank into a kitchen chair. Oh my goodness, Tom, this is incredible. When did you take the MCAT again? Last spring, I replied, still scanning the letter. I scored in the 97th percentile on my third attempt. Wait, Uncle Robert interrupted. What do you mean third attempt, William? You told me Tom was struggling academically. All eyes turned to my father, whose deception was unraveling in real time. We didn't want to get anyone's hopes up in case he failed again. Failed. I laughed bitterly. Dad, I scored higher than 97% of students taking that exam. My research on emergency department patient flow has been published in 2 medical journals. I was promoted to lead research coordinator at one of Colorado's top hospitals. What part of that sounds like failure to you? The kitchen phone rang its shrill sound, cutting through the tension. Sandra moved to answer it, but I held up my hand. Let me guess, I said. You've been screening my phone calls too. William's guilty expression confirmed my suspicion. I answered the phone myself. Hello, Tom Bradley speaking. Tom, thank goodness. This is Dr. Sarah Martinez from University of Colorado Medical School admissions. I've been trying to reach you for weeks about your acceptance. We need to confirm your enrollment by tomorrow, or we'll have to offer your spot to someone on the waiting list. My family watched in stunned silence as the conversation unfolded. Dr. Martinez, I apologize for not responding sooner. I just received your letter today due to some family complications. I absolutely accept your offer and would be honored to join the incoming class. Wonderful. I have to say, Tom, we were concerned when we didn't hear from you. Your application was one of the strongest we've ever received. Are you able to come in tomorrow afternoon to complete your enrollment paperwork? Yes, ma'am, I'll be there. After hanging up, I turned to face my family with a mixture of triumph and heartbreak. That was the admissions director. Apparently, they've been holding my spot for 6 weeks, wondering why I never responded to their acceptance. William's defensive anger returned. Don't look at us like that, Tom. We were protecting you from disappointment. Protecting me from a full scholarship to medical school? Those scholarships come with strings attached, Sandra said weakly. You'll probably have to work in some terrible rural clinic for years. I pulled out my phone and showed them the scholarship details I had Googled during Dr. Martinez's call. Actually, the Primary Care Scholars Program allows me to choose any residency program in Colorado and practice anywhere in the state after graduation. It's designed to increase the number of physicians serving Colorado communities. Danny shook his head in amazement. Cousin, this is actually incredible. Why didn't you tell us you were this smart? Because Mom and Dad have been telling everyone I was struggling academically while hiding my achievements, I replied. How exactly was I supposed to share good news that they intercepted before I even knew about it? Uncle Robert looked genuinely troubled now. William, this is starting to sound like more than just protective parenting. Don't you start, William snapped. Robert, you know as well as I do that Tom belongs in the family business. We've been planning for him to take over Henderson Plumbing when I retire. Without asking Tom what he wanted, parents don't ask children what they want. We guide them toward what's best for them. I laughed humorlessly. Dad, I'm 28 years old. I'm not a child anymore. You're still living under my roof. Because you convinced me I couldn't afford anything else while going to school. But now I'm wondering what other financial opportunities you've hidden from me. The question hung in the air like smoke from a dangerous fire. Sandra and William exchanged another one of their guilty glances, and I knew I had stumbled onto something bigger than hidden mail. What other opportunities, Dad? Tom, let's not air all our family business in front of everyone, Sandra pleaded. Our business? I felt my voice rising again. This is my business, my life, my future. What else have you been hiding? Uncle Robert, clearly uncomfortable with the tension, tried to change the subject. Why don't we all sit down for Christmas dinner and discuss this calmly? No, I said firmly. I need answers now. What other financial opportunities have you hidden from me? William's resolve finally cracked under the pressure of my direct questioning and the scrutinizing gazes of his extended family. Fine. You want to know your grandmother Helen left money for your education? We used some of it for house improvements because we figured you'd never actually get into medical school. The words hit me like a physical blow. Grandmother Helen, my mother's mother, had died 3 years ago after a long battle with cancer. She had been my biggest supporter, always encouraging my academic pursuits and telling me that education was the one thing no one could ever take away from me. How much money? I whispered. Sandra wrung her hands nervously. $42,000. But Tom, we needed a new roof, and the kitchen renovation was essential for the house's value. $42,000, I repeated slowly. Grandmother Helen left me $42,000 for education and you spent it on home improvements. We're your parents, William said defensively. That money was meant to benefit the family. No, Dad, that money was left specifically to me for my education by a woman who believed in my dreams when no one else would. Aunt Patricia looked horrified. Helen specifically told me that money was for Tom's medical school. She made me promise to make sure he knew about it. Sandra's face flushed red. Patricia, that's not how we understood it. Yes, it is, Aunt Patricia replied firmly. Helen was very clear about her intentions. She wanted Tom to become the doctor she always knew he could be. The betrayal felt complete now. Not only had my parents sabotaged my opportunities, but they had stolen money that my dying grandmother had designated for my education. Money that could have eliminated most of my student loan debt. Where's the documentation? I asked. I want to see Grandmother Helen's will and any trust documents. Tom, you're being unreasonable, Sandra said. The money's already spent. That doesn't matter. I want to see the legal documents that gave you the right to spend my inheritance. William and Sandra's guilty silence told me everything I needed to know. They had taken money that wasn't legally theirs to take. Jessica, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during this revelation, finally spoke up. Mom, Dad, this is actually pretty messed up. If Grandma Helen left money specifically for Tom's school, Jessica, stay out of this, William barked. Actually, don't stay out of this, I said. Jessica, did you know about Grandmother Helen's money? My sister looked uncomfortable for the first time all day. I knew there was some kind of inheritance, but Mom and Dad said it was for family expenses. Family expenses, I repeated bitterly, like granite countertops and a master bathroom renovation. Uncle Robert cleared his throat. William, I think you need to come clean about all of this. If Helen left money specifically for Tom's education, don't lecture me about my own mother-in-law, William interrupted. Helen always favored Tom anyway. She never thought Sandra and I were good enough for her precious grandson. The admission revealed the deeper psychological motivation behind their sabotage. This wasn't just about protecting me from disappointment. This was about resentment, jealousy, and their own feelings of inadequacy projected onto my academic achievements. So you sabotaged my education because you felt judged by my grandmother? I asked incredulously. We didn't sabotage anything, Sandra protested. We just tried to keep you grounded in reality. Reality. I held up the acceptance letter again. The reality is that I've been accepted to medical school with a full scholarship. The reality is that I've been academically successful despite your interference, not because of your protection. Danny and Marcus, who had been silent observers during the family drama, exchanged uncomfortable glances. Marcus spoke first. Tom, man, this is pretty heavy stuff. Maybe we should give you guys some privacy to work this out. No, stay, I said. I want everyone to hear this. I want the whole family to understand what's been happening here. I turned back to my parents with a calm determination that surprised even myself. Mom, Dad, I need you to understand something very clearly. You have stolen from me. You have lied to me. You have actively sabotaged opportunities that could have changed my life. This isn't protection. This is abuse. The word abuse hung in the air like a thunderclap. Sandra started crying and William's face turned from purple to ashen gray. Now you listen here, young man. Uncle Robert said, his protective instincts toward his brother kicking in. That's your mother and father you're talking to. And I'm their son, I replied evenly. Their adult son whose rights they've been violating for years. The sound of car doors slamming outside announced the arrival of more family members, but I barely registered it. My entire world had shifted in the span of 2 hours, and I was still trying to process the magnitude of my parents' deception. What other lies would surface before this Christmas Day was over? The front door burst open, bringing a gust of frigid December air and the boisterous voices of more relatives. Cousin Danny's wife Sarah entered first, carrying a casserole dish and chattering about holiday traffic. Behind her came my father's sister Aunt Linda with her husband Frank and their teenage daughter Emma. "Merry Christmas, everyone!" Aunt Linda called out cheerfully, then stopped abruptly when she noticed the tension filling the kitchen like fog. Oh my, did we interrupt something serious? I stood there holding my acceptance letter surrounded by torn mail fragments and the shameful remnants of my family's deception. The contrast between Aunt Linda's holiday joy and our toxic family drama felt surreal. "Just a little family discussion," William said through gritted teeth, shooting me a warning look that I ignored completely. "Actually, Aunt Linda," I said clearly, "we're discussing how Mom and Dad have been intercepting my mail for 2 years and spent my inheritance from grandmother Helen on house renovations instead of my education." Aunt Linda's casserole dish nearly slipped from her hands. "What Helen's money?" "But that was specifically for your medical school." Sandra's face crumpled as another family member confirmed what she and William had been denying. "Linda, please, don't make this harder than it already is." "Make what harder?" Frank asked, setting down a bag of gifts and looking around at our faces with growing concern. "What's going on here?" Uncle Robert stepped forward with his characteristic directness. "Frank, apparently William and Sandra have been hiding Tom's mail and spending Helen's education money on home improvements. Tom just found out he was accepted to medical school 6 weeks ago but never got the letter." Medical school. 15-year-old Emma looked genuinely impressed. "Cousin Tom, that's amazing. I didn't even know you were smart enough for that." The innocent comment hit like a sledgehammer. Even my teenage cousin had internalized the narrative that I wasn't academically capable. "Emma," I said gently, "what exactly did your parents tell you about my education?" She glanced nervously between the adults. Mom and Dad said you were struggling in community college and that Uncle William was worried about you wasting money on school when you could be learning a trade." Aunt Linda's mouth fell open. "Emma, where did you hear that Tom graduated from the University of Colorado with highest honors?" "He did." I pulled out my phone and showed Emma my LinkedIn profile, which detailed my academic achievements, research publications, and hospital work experience. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through accomplishments that painted a completely different picture than what she had been told. "Uncle William," she said accusingly, "you told us Tom was barely passing his classes." William's web of lies was unraveling faster than he could manage. "Emma, we didn't want to get anyone's hopes up in case Tom didn't succeed." "But he did succeed," Frank pointed out. "According to this, he's been succeeding for years." My phone rang again, and I glanced at the caller ID, Dr. Martinez from the medical school. I answered immediately, putting the call on speaker so everyone could hear. "Tom, I'm sorry to bother you again on Christmas, but I wanted to follow up on our conversation. I've been reviewing your file, and I noticed we sent several letters over the past few months that went unanswered. Is everything all right with your mailing address? Dr. Martinez, could you tell my family what those letters contained?" "Of course. In addition to your acceptance letter, we sent information about your scholarship award housing options and an invitation to our early admission celebration dinner last month. We also forwarded several research opportunities and a request from our dean to nominate you for the National Medical Student Leadership Conference. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. Every family member stared at William and Sandra with growing horror as the scope of their interference became clear. Dr. Martinez, I continued, could you also tell them about my undergraduate performance and MCAT scores? Certainly. Tom graduated summa cum laude with a 3.96 GPA in biochemistry scored in the 97th percentile on his MKT and has published research in the Journal of Emergency Medicine and Academic Emergency Medicine. His recommendation letters from faculty at Denver General Hospital were among the strongest we've ever received. Aunt Linda sank into a chair, her face pale with shock. Helen would be so proud, she whispered. Thank you, Dr. Martinez. I'll see you tomorrow for enrollment. After hanging up, I looked around the room at my family members' stunned faces. The truth was finally out, and there was no way for my parents to minimize or explain away their deception. Tom, Frank said slowly, this means your parents have been telling us lies about you for years. Not just lies, I replied. Active sabotage. They've been destroying opportunities, hiding achievements, and stealing money that was meant to help me succeed. William finally exploded with the fury of a cornered animal. You ungrateful little bastard. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us, humiliating us in front of the whole family. What you've done for me, I laughed bitterly. Dad, what exactly have you done for me besides try to destroy my dreams? We kept a roof over your head. We fed you. We supported you through school. You supported me through school by hiding scholarship opportunities and stealing my inheritance. That's your idea of support. Sandra was crying openly now. Tom, we love you. Everything we did was because we love you and didn't want to see you get hurt. Love. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Mom, love doesn't involve deception and theft. Love supports dreams, even when they're difficult to achieve. Emma, who had been quietly absorbing the adult drama around her, spoke up with the clarity that only teenagers possess. This is actually really messed up. Like you guys basically gaslighted Tom for years. Emma, watch your language, Aunt Linda said automatically, then paused. Actually, she's not wrong. This does sound like psychological manipulation. Jessica, who had been filming intermittently throughout the confrontation, lowered her phone for the first time. Wait, are we seriously going to act like Tom's the victim here? He's been moody and difficult about this medical school thing for years. Jessica. I said quietly, I was moody and difficult because I kept applying for opportunities and never hearing back. I thought I was failing, when actually I was succeeding beyond my wildest dreams. Nah, that's not our fault, she replied defensively. It's literally your fault. You were part of hiding this from me. Uncle Robert, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. William, I need to ask you something directly. How long has this been going on? Robert, don't you start judging me too. I'm not judging, I'm asking for facts. How long have you been intercepting Tom's mail? William looked around the room at faces that ranged from disappointed to disgusted. His family support system was crumbling in real time. It started small, he admitted. Tom was getting rejected from medical schools during his first application cycle. He was devastated. Sandra and I decided to screen his mail to protect him from more bad news. But it didn't stop there, Aunt Linda observed. No, it didn't stop there. When Tom started doing better academically, when opportunities started coming, we were afraid he'd leave us behind. We were afraid he'd become one of those doctors who thinks he's too good for his family. The honest admission hung in the air like a toxic cloud. This wasn't about protection. This was about fear, insecurity, and the desire to keep me small enough to remain under their control. Frank shook his head in disgust. William, that's not love, that's selfishness. Easy for you to say, Frank. Your kids never had the kind of big dreams that would take them away from the family. Take him away from the family. Aunt Linda stood up, her voice rising with indignation. Tom's going to medical school 30 minutes from here. He could have been practicing medicine in this community, helping his own neighbors. And you sabotaged that because you were afraid of losing control. The weight of their fear-based decisions was becoming clear to everyone in the room, except my parents themselves. They had been so terrified of my success that they had actively worked to prevent it. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced down and saw it was from my research supervisor at Denver General Hospital. Tom, congratulations on your medical school acceptance. Dr. Rodriguez told me the good news. We're all so proud of you. I showed the message to my family. Even my colleagues at the hospital knew about my acceptance before I did. Dr. Martinez must have called them after not hearing from me. Sarah, Danny's wife, spoke for the first time since arriving. This is honestly heartbreaking. Tom, your parents robbed you of the joy of celebrating your achievements. They robbed him of more than that, Emma said with teenage bluntness. They robbed him of his inheritance money and probably cost him other opportunities too. William's anger flared again. Emma, you don't understand the situation. Sometimes parents have to make difficult decisions. Difficult decisions? Frank laughed harshly. William, you stole money from your own son and lied to your entire family about his achievements. Those aren't difficult decisions. Those are crimes. The word crimes seemed to echo in the suddenly quiet kitchen. Sandra stopped crying and looked up with genuine fear in her eyes. Crimes, she whispered. Mail tampering is a federal offense, Frank said matter-of-factly. And if you accessed money that was legally designated for Tom's education… Frank, stop, William interrupted. You're being dramatic. Am I, Tom? Do you have copies of your grandmother's will? I realized I had never actually seen the legal documents surrounding my grandmother's death. My parents had handled everything, telling me that she had left some money for the family, but nothing specific for me. I don't have copies of anything, I admitted. Mom and Dad handled all the legal arrangements. Aunt Linda and Uncle Robert exchanged significant glances. Tom, Aunt Linda said carefully, I was present when Helen wrote her will. She was very specific about money for your education. We should request copies from her attorney. The suggestion hit my parents like a bomb. Sandra started crying again and William's face went completely white. That's not necessary, he said quickly. Ancient history now, anyway. It's not ancient history if money was stolen, Frank replied firmly. Tom, you need to contact Helen's attorney and get copies of those documents. As the conversation swirled around me, I felt a strange sense of clarity descending. For years, I had questioned my own abilities, wondering why I wasn't hearing back from schools and programs despite strong academic performance. I had internalized my parents' narrative that I was reaching too high, that medical school was unrealistic for someone like me. Now I understood that their narrative had been completely false. I wasn't failing. I was succeeding despite their active interference. The question was, what was I going to do about it? The weight of the revelations pressed down on me like a physical force, but for the first time in years, I felt clarity instead of confusion. My family's betrayal was complete and undeniable, witnessed by relatives who could no longer pretend that my parents' behavior was protective rather than destructive. I need to leave, I announced suddenly. I can't stay here anymore. Tom, don't be dramatic, Sandra pleaded through her tears. It's Christmas Day. We're family. Family doesn't steal from each other. I replied, folding the acceptance letter and putting it carefully in my jacket pocket along with the other intercepted mail. Family doesn't sabotage each other's dreams. William stepped toward me, with his hands raised in a gesture that might have been threatening or pleading. Son, you're not thinking clearly. Where are you going to go? This is your home. This stopped being my home the moment you decided my future was yours to control. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my contacts looking for my friend Marcus Johnson's number. Marcus and I had been study partners during my post-baccalaureate program, and his family had always been warm and welcoming during our study sessions. "Tom," Aunt Linda said gently, "you're welcome to stay with us until you figure things out." "Or with us," Frank added. "What your parents did is unforgivable." The support from my extended family felt like a lifeline. But I needed more than temporary housing. I needed legal advice and emotional distance to process what had happened. "Thank you both, but I think I need to stay with friends for a while." Marcus answered on the second ring. "Tom, Merry Christmas, man. How's the family celebration going?" The irony of his question almost made me laugh. "Marcus, I need your help. Can I come over? It's an emergency." "Of course, what's wrong?" "I'll explain when I get there. Is your dad home? I might need some legal advice." "Yeah, Dad's here. Tom, you're scaring me." "What happened?" "My parents have been sabotaging my medical school applications for 2 years. I just found out I was accepted to CU 6 weeks ago, but they threw away the acceptance letter." The silence on the other end of the phone lasted so long, I thought we might have been disconnected. "Marcus?" "Jesus Christ, Tom. Get over here right now. Dad's going to want to hear this." I hung up and looked around at my family who had been listening to my side of the conversation with varying expressions of concern, guilt, and anger. "Tom." Uncle Robert said, "Before you leave, I want you to know that not everyone in this family supports what William and Sandra did. You have allies here." "Thank you, Uncle Robert. That means more than you know." Jessica, who had been unusually subdued, since the magnitude of our parents' deception became clear, stepped forward hesitantly. "Tom, I'm sorry about filming earlier. I didn't realize how serious this was." I looked at my sister, seeing something like genuine remorse in her eyes for the first time all day. "Jessica, you filmed me at my most vulnerable moment and threatened to post it on social media. That's not something you do to family." "I know, I was being a bitch. I'm sorry." The apology was more than I had expected from her, but the damage was already done. Trust once broken doesn't repair itself with simple words. "I need to go," I said, moving toward the front door. "Tom, wait," Sandra called out desperately. "Please don't leave like this. We can work everything out as a family." I turned back to look at my mother, this woman who had given birth to me and raised me, but had also systematically undermined my efforts to build a future for myself. "Mom, you and Dad stole $42,000 from me and sabotaged my career for 2 years. There's no working this out between us anymore. There's only legal consequences and learning to live with what you've done." William's defensive anger returned. "Don't you threaten us, Tom. We're still your parents. Being my parents doesn't give you the right to commit crimes against me." I walked out of the house where I had grown up, leaving behind the warmth of Christmas dinner and the toxic dysfunction that had poisoned my life for years. The cold December air hit my face like a splash of reality, clearing away the emotional fog that had clouded my judgment for so long. The drive to Marcus's house gave me 20 minutes to process what had just happened. My entire understanding of my family, my abilities, and my future had been transformed in the span of a few hours. The relief I felt was almost overwhelming, but it was mixed with a deep sadness for the relationships that might never recover from this betrayal. Marcus's family lived in a modest 2-story house in Lakewood that always smelled like his mother's cooking and rang with the sounds of laughter and genuine affection. When I pulled into their driveway, Marcus was already waiting on the front porch with his father, David, who worked as a family law attorney in downtown Denver. "Tom, David Johnson," said, pulling me into a firm handshake that conveyed both warmth and professional seriousness. "Marcus filled me in on the basics. Come inside where it's warm and tell me exactly what happened." The Johnson family Christmas looked like something from a holiday movie. Their tree sparkled with white lights and handmade ornaments. Presents were neatly arranged underneath, and the dining room table was set for their extended family dinner. The contrast with the chaos I had just escaped was striking. "I'm sorry to interrupt your Christmas," I said as Marcus's mother, Elena, embraced me in one of her signature hugs. "Nonsense," she replied firmly. "Family emergencies don't wait for convenient timing. Sit down and tell us everything." For the next hour, I laid out the complete story for the Johnson family. David took notes on a legal pad, while Elena and Marcus listened with expressions of growing horror and outrage. When I finished, the living room was silent, except for the gentle crackling of their fireplace. Tom David said carefully, "What your parents did constitutes several serious crimes. Mail tampering is a federal offense. If they accessed your grandmother's inheritance illegally, that's theft, and possibly fraud. The systematic deception could be considered financial abuse." Financial abuse? When family members use money or financial control to manipulate or harm someone. Your parents used their control over your mail and inheritance to limit your opportunities and keep you dependent on them. Elena shook her head in disgust. "I can't imagine doing something like that to Marcus or his sister. Parents are supposed to help their children succeed, not tear them down." Marcus had been unusually quiet during my story, but now he spoke up with barely controlled anger. "Tom, do you remember all those times you thought you were failing because you weren't hearing back from programs? All those nights you questioned whether you were smart enough for medical school? Your parents caused that pain deliberately." The psychological dimension of the abuse was becoming clearer. My parents hadn't just stolen opportunities, they had damaged my self-confidence and sense of worth in the process. David I said, "What are my legal options?" "Several. We could file criminal complaints for mail tampering and theft. We could pursue civil action to recover your inheritance and seek damages for lost opportunities. We could request restraining orders if you feel threatened." The idea of taking legal action against my own parents felt surreal, but the alternative was allowing them to escape consequences for their destructive behavior. "I want to see my grandmother's will first," I decided. "I need to understand exactly what she intended and what they stole from me." Smart approach. I can contact Helen's attorney tomorrow and request copies of all relevant documents. In the meantime, you're welcome to stay here as long as needed. "Thank you, but I don't want to impose on your family Christmas." "Tom," Elena said firmly, "you're not imposing. You're family to us. Marcus considers you his brother, and that makes you our son too." The kindness of people who weren't even related to me highlighted how toxic my biological family had become. The Johnsons offered support and protection without conditions or manipulation, the way healthy families should operate. "There's something else we should consider," David added thoughtfully. "If your parents have been systematically intercepting mail and spreading false information about your academic performance, there might be other victims. Other victims. Neighbors, family members, possibly other students if this behavior extends beyond your immediate situation. Mail tampering often involves more than just one target. The possibility that my parents' crimes extended beyond my personal situation added another layer of complexity to an already overwhelming situation. My phone buzzed with a text message from Jessica. "Tom, Mom, and Dad are freaking out. Dad keeps saying you can't prove anything and Mom won't stop crying. Uncle Robert told them they need to hire a lawyer." I showed the message to David, who nodded grimly. That confirms they understand the legal implications of their actions. "Tom, I recommend you don't communicate directly with your parents until we understand the full scope of what they've done." "What about the medical school enrollment tomorrow?" "That's your priority. Focus on securing your future while we handle the legal issues. Justice moves slowly, but it does move." As I settled into the Johnson family's guest room that night, I reflected on the strangest Christmas of my life. I had woken up that morning as a confused, struggling graduate student who thought he was failing despite his best efforts. I was ending the day as an accepted medical student with a full scholarship who had discovered that his family had been sabotaging his success for years. The truth was liberating, but it was also terrifying. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of rebuilding my life without the family that had raised me, but ultimately betrayed me. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful about my future. I woke up in the Johnson family's guest room to the smell of coffee and bacon sounds that felt foreign after the emotional warfare of yesterday's Christmas dinner. The morning light streaming through unfamiliar windows reminded me that my life had fundamentally changed overnight. Elena knocked gently on the door before entering with a cup of coffee and a warm smile. "Good morning, sweetheart. How did you sleep?" "Better than I expected," I admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Thank you for everything, Mrs. Johnson." "Elena, please. And there's nothing to thank us for. This is what decent people do when someone they care about needs help." The contrast with my own family's behavior couldn't have been starker. The Johnsons had offered unconditional support to someone who wasn't even related to them, while my own parents had systematically undermined someone they claimed to love. David appeared in the doorway, wearing his professional attorney demeanor. "Tom, I've been on the phone with Helen's estate attorney since 7 this morning. We need to talk." The gravity in his voice made my stomach clench. "What did you find out?" "Your grandmother left you $68,000 specifically for medical education, not the $42,000 your parents claimed. There was also a separate trust fund of $25,000 for emergency expenses during your schooling. The numbers hit me like physical blows. $93,000 total. Plus interest over the past 3 years. Your parents have stolen approximately $105,000 that legally belonged to you." Elena gasped and covered her mouth. "Over $100,000. Tom, that's more than most people make in a year." "There's more," David continued grimly. "The estate attorney, Margaret Walsh, says your parents forged your signature on documents that gave them access to the funds. They also lied to her about your academic status, claiming you had dropped out of school and were struggling with substance abuse. The scope of their deception kept expanding beyond anything I could have imagined. They hadn't just stolen money, they had systematically destroyed my reputation with legal professionals who were supposed to protect my interests." "Margaret wants to meet with us this morning before your medical school appointment," David said. "She's prepared to file criminal charges and has already contacted the FBI about the mail tampering." "The FBI? Mail interference is a federal crime, Tom. When Margaret heard about the systematic interception of your academic correspondence, she immediately referred the case to federal authorities. My phone started buzzing with increasingly frantic text messages from my family. Jessica had sent 12 messages overnight, ranging from apologies to threats to pleas for me to come home and work this out. William had left 3 voicemails that David advised me not to listen to without legal representation present. "They're scared?" Elena observed, reading the messages over my shoulder. "Good. They should be scared." At 10:30 that morning, I sat in Margaret Walsh's downtown law office, staring at legal documents that revealed the full extent of my parents' betrayal. Helen's will was crystal clear. In its intentions, all funds were designated specifically for my medical education, with detailed instructions for their use and explicit provisions preventing family members from accessing the money for other purposes. "Your grandmother was very specific about her wishes." Margaret explained, her voice carrying the weight of professional outrage. "She came to me 6 months before her death and expressed concerns about your parents' attitude toward your education. Helen suspected they might try to interfere with her plans. She knew they would do this. She feared they might. Helen left detailed instructions requiring your personal signature for any fund access requiring proof of enrollment in medical school, and explicitly stating that no family member had authority to make decisions about this money except you." The forged documents David had mentioned were sophisticated enough to fool a casual observer, but Margaret's trained eye had identified multiple inconsistencies when she reviewed the file in response to David's inquiry. "The handwriting analysis alone will be enough to prove forgery," she continued. "But we also have bank records showing the money was used for home improvements rather than educational expenses, which violates the explicit terms of the trust. At 11:15, FBI agents arrived at the law office to take my statement about the mail interference. Special Agent Sarah Chen was a serious woman in her early 40s who treated the case with the gravity of any other federal crime. Moinsentin, Mr. Bradley. She said mail tampering affects the integrity of the entire postal system. When people intercept correspondence to control or manipulate others, it undermines one of our most basic communication infrastructures. I never thought about it that way. Most people don't. But imagine if everyone started intercepting mail they didn't want their family members to receive. The system would collapse. That's why these crimes carry serious federal penalties. Agent Chen explained that my parents faced up to 5 years in prison for each count of mail tampering, plus additional charges for forgery and theft of funds from a legal trust. The systematic nature of their interference over multiple years would likely result in enhanced penalties. We'll be executing a search warrant on your parents' residence this afternoon, she informed me. Based on your statement and the attorney's documentation, we have probable cause to believe they've been committing federal crimes for over 2 years. The idea of FBI agents searching my childhood home felt surreal, but the evidence of my parents' crimes was overwhelming. They had left a clear paper trail of forged documents, diverted funds, and intercepted mail that would be impossible to explain away. At 1 o'clock, I walked into the University of Colorado School of Medicine admissions office, feeling like a completely different person than the confused, defeated graduate student I had been just 24 hours earlier. Dr. Martinez greeted me with genuine warmth and excitement about my enrollment. Tom, I have to say your story has already begun making an impact here. When I told our faculty about the family interference you experienced, several professors expressed interest in incorporating your case into discussions about systemic barriers to medical education. My case? Students from working-class backgrounds often face family pressure to abandon academic pursuits. Your experience, while extreme, highlights issues that affect many first-generation college students. We'd like your permission to use your story as a teaching tool with your identity protected, of course. The possibility that my personal trauma could help other students facing similar challenges gave new meaning to the ordeal I had endured. I'd be honored to help, I said. As I completed my enrollment paperwork, Dr. Martinez shared additional information about the opportunities I had missed due to my parents' mail interference. You were selected for our summer research program, which would have given you early laboratory experience and a $5,000 stipend. You were also invited to our Diversity and Inclusion Leadership Council, which provides mentorship for students from underrepresented backgrounds. Each missed opportunity felt like a small death, but I forced myself to focus on the future rather than dwelling on the past. I was finally where I belonged, surrounded by people who valued education and supported academic achievement. At 3:30 that afternoon, while I was touring the medical school facilities with other incoming students, my phone rang with a call from Agent Chen. Mr. Bradley, our search of your parents' residence has been very productive. We've recovered additional mail addressed to you dating back 3 years, including scholarship notifications, interview invitations, and financial aid documents. 3 years? I thought it was 2. The interference began earlier than you realized. We also found evidence suggesting your parents may have been intercepting mail for other family members and possibly neighbors. The revelation that other people had been victims of my parents' crimes added a new dimension to the case. This wasn't just personal family dysfunction anymore. It was a broader pattern of criminal behavior that had affected multiple people. We've also discovered that your father has been telling people in your community that you've been struggling academically and possibly involved with drugs. We have documentation of him spreading these false narratives to potential employers, landlords, and even medical professionals. The systematic character assassination was almost more devastating than the financial theft. My parents had worked to destroy not just my opportunities, but my reputation in the community where I had grown up. Agent Chen, what happens next? Your parents will be arrested tomorrow morning. Based on the evidence we've collected, The U.S. Attorney's Office will likely file federal charges including mail tampering, wire fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. They could face significant prison time. The finality of federal charges felt both terrifying and relieving. There would be no family meetings, no emotional manipulation, no attempts to minimize or explain away their behavior. The legal system would hold them accountable for their crimes, regardless of their relationship to me. That evening, as I sat in the Johnson family's living room, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about my well-being, I reflected on the strange turns my life had taken. 24 hours ago, I had been a confused graduate student questioning my own abilities. Now I was an incoming medical student with federal agents investigating the family members who had sabotaged my dreams. Tom, Marcus said, I keep thinking about all those nights you stayed up studying, wondering why you weren't hearing back from programs. You thought you weren't good enough when really you were being sabotaged by the people who were supposed to support you. The psychological damage might be the worst part, Elena added. They didn't just steal opportunities, they made you doubt yourself. David looked up from the legal documents he had been reviewing. Tom, there's something else you should know. Margaret Walsh has been contacted by 3 other families who suspect similar male interference. Your case is exposing a broader pattern that might have affected many more people. The possibility that my personal nightmare could lead to justice for other victims gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't expected. Sometimes the worst experiences in our lives become the foundation for helping others avoid similar pain. As I prepared for bed in the guest room that was becoming my temporary sanctuary, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: genuine optimism about my future. Tomorrow, I would begin my medical education, surrounded by supportive faculty and fellow students who valued achievement and personal growth. My parents had tried to keep me small, but they had ultimately failed. Justice was coming, and I was finally free to become the person I was always meant to be. 6 months later, I stood in the University of Colorado School of Medicine lecture hall wearing my short white coat for the first time. The weight of the fabric felt symbolic, representing not just my entry into the medical profession, but my survival of a family betrayal that could have destroyed my dreams forever. My parents had been sentenced 3 weeks earlier. William received 4 years in federal prison for mail tampering, forgery, and theft from a legal trust. Sandra received 2 years in a minimum security facility, with the judge acknowledging her cooperation during the investigation and her eventual admission of guilt. Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia had faced civil lawsuits for their roles in spreading false information about my academic performance, ultimately settling out of court and publicly apologizing for their participation in the character assassination campaign. Jessica had surprised everyone, including herself, by entering therapy to address what she described as years of toxic family dynamics. She had testified during our parents' sentencing hearing about the psychological abuse I had endured, her voice shaking as she acknowledged her own role in the cruelty. I filmed my brother's breakdown and threatened to humiliate him on social media, she had told the judge. I was so caught up in our family's dysfunction that I couldn't see how wrong our behavior was until outside people witnessed it and showed me a different way to treat people you're supposed to love. The judge had been moved by Jessica's testimony, using it as an example of how toxic family systems can corrupt even young people who might otherwise make better choices. Dr. Martinez approached me after our white coat ceremony, her face beaming with pride. Tom, I have news that I think you'll find meaningful. The scholarship fund you established with your recovered inheritance has received its first applicant. 6 months earlier, Margaret Walsh had helped me recover not just my stolen inheritance, but additional damages and interest, bringing the total recovery to over $140,000. I had used half of that money to establish the Helen Bradley Foundation for Educational Freedom, designed to help students whose families were sabotaging their academic pursuits. Her name is Maria Santos, Dr. Martinez continued. She's a brilliant pre-med student whose family has been hiding her MCAT scores and telling her she's not smart enough for medical school. Sound familiar? The parallel to my own experience was painfully clear. What can we do to help her? We're working with family law attorneys to establish her legal independence from parents who have been controlling her academic correspondence. Your foundation is funding her MCAT retake and application fees. The knowledge that my personal nightmare was becoming a tool to help other students gave profound meaning to the trauma I had endured. Margaret Walsh had told me that federal investigations triggered by my case had uncovered 17 other families engaged in similar mail tampering and financial manipulation of adult children. Academic sabotage is more common than people realize, she had explained. Many families can't accept that education might change their children's relationship to family traditions and expectations. Rather than supporting growth, they choose control. That afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. Jessica knocked on my door carrying a manila folder and wearing the expression of someone who had been rehearsing a difficult conversation. "Tom, I have something that belongs to you," she said, offering me the folder. "I found it in Mom's dresser when I was packing her things for storage." Inside were photographs of my graduation from the University of Colorado, pictures I had never seen before. My parents had attended my commencement ceremony in secret, sitting in the back row, and photographing my moment of triumph while simultaneously working to undermine my future success. "They were proud of you," Jessica said quietly. "They just didn't know how to handle their pride. Dad always said you were too smart for our family, but instead of celebrating that he tried to bring you back down to his level." I studied the photographs, seeing my own joy in that moment of academic achievement contrasted with the knowledge of what my parents were planning to do to my future opportunities. "Jessica, why are you showing me this?" "Because I've learned something in therapy. People can feel proud and threatened at the same time. Mom and Dad loved you, but they also resented you for having opportunities they never had. Instead of working through those feelings, they chose to sabotage you." The psychological insight felt both healing and heartbreaking. My parents had acted out of their own pain and insecurity, but that didn't excuse the damage they had caused or make their behavior acceptable. "I've been thinking about visiting them," I admitted. "Not to reconcile exactly, but to try to understand how they justified what they did." "I think that might be good for all of you," Jessica said. "They've both expressed remorse during therapy sessions, but I don't think they fully understand how much damage they caused until they hear it directly from you." 2 weeks later, I sat across from my father in the visiting room of a federal correctional institution in Colorado. William had lost weight and looked older than his 58 years, his hands shaking slightly as he tried to find words for an impossible conversation. "Tom, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness." He began, his voice hoarse with emotion. "What we did was unforgivable. Dad, I need to understand why. Help me understand how you justified stealing my future and lying to me for years." William was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands folded on the metal table between us. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with tears I had never seen from him before. "I was scared," he whispered. "Scared that if you became a doctor, you'd look down on me the way my father looked down on me for dropping out of high school. Scared that you'd be embarrassed to have a plumber for a father." The admission revealed the deep insecurity that had motivated years of destructive behavior. My father had tried to prevent my success because he couldn't imagine a world where academic achievement didn't create distance between family members. "Dad, I never wanted to leave the family. I wanted to bring honor to it. I wanted to be the first person in our family to graduate from medical school. I know that now. The therapist here has helped me understand that my fears were about my own shame, not about anything you actually did or said." We talked for another hour, covering years of pain and misunderstanding that would take much longer to heal completely. By the end of our conversation, I felt something I hadn't expected: compassion for the broken man who had raised me and then tried to destroy my dreams out of his own emotional wounds. I visited Sandra 2 weeks after that. Her federal facility was more comfortable than William's, but her emotional state was far more fragile. She cried through most of our conversation, apologizing repeatedly for the damage she had caused. Tom. I lie awake every night thinking about all the opportunities we stole from you, all the joy we took away when you should have been celebrating your achievements. Mom, the opportunities are still there. I'm in medical school now. I'm doing well. You didn't succeed in stopping me. But we hurt you so much in the process. We made you doubt yourself when you should have been confident. We poisoned your relationship with your own abilities. Sandra was right about the psychological damage, but I had learned something important about resilience during the past 6 months. External validation and family support were wonderful when available, but true strength came from internal knowledge of one's own worth and capabilities. Mom, you and Dad taught me something valuable, even though you didn't mean to. You taught me that my worth isn't determined by other people's opinions, even when those people are family. You taught me to trust my own judgment over others' expectations. It wasn't the lesson they had intended to teach, but it was the lesson I had needed to learn. 3 months later, I received a letter from Maria Santos, the first recipient of the Helen Bradley Foundation Scholarship. She had been accepted to 3 medical schools and was beginning her studies at the University of New Mexico. Dear Tom, her letter began, "You saved my life without even knowing me. When my family told me I wasn't smart enough for medical school, I believed them until your foundation helped me discover that I had actually scored in the 95th percentile on the MCAT. Like you, I had been succeeding while being told I was failing. Thank you for turning your trauma into hope for other people." Reading Maria's letter in my apartment near campus, surrounded by medical textbooks and anatomy charts, I felt a profound sense of completion. My grandmother Helen's money was finally fulfilling its intended purpose, but in a way that extended beyond just my own education. The Helen Bradley Foundation had grown to serve 12 students in its first year, each one facing family sabotage of their academic pursuits. Margaret Walsh had told me that awareness of academic abuse was spreading through the legal and educational communities, leading to new protections for adult children whose families attempted to control their educational choices. Your case changed how we think about family financial abuse, she had explained. Before this, most people assumed that family financial control was always benevolent. Now we understand that families can use money and information access to maintain unhealthy power dynamics. 6 months after that conversation, I was invited to speak at a national conference on family abuse and educational access. Standing at a podium in front of 300 legal professionals, educators, and mental health experts, I shared the story that had begun with torn mail on Christmas morning. Family love and family control are not the same thing, I concluded my presentation. Real love supports growth, even when that growth changes family dynamics. Real love celebrates success, even when that success challenges family traditions. Real love trusts people to make their own decisions about their own lives. The standing ovation that followed felt like vindication, not just for my own experience, but for every student whose family had tried to keep them small out of fear, insecurity, or misguided protection. That evening, as I walked across the University of Colorado campus, where I was now thriving as a second-year medical student, I thought about the strange journey that had brought me to this place. My parents' betrayal had nearly destroyed my dreams, but their failure to stop me had ultimately made me stronger and more determined than I would have been without the obstacles they created. I had learned that sometimes the people who claim to love us most are the people most threatened by our potential for growth. I had learned that external validation, while wonderful, could never substitute for internal confidence in one's own abilities and worth. Most importantly, I had learned that personal trauma could be transformed into a force for helping others avoid similar pain. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Johnson. "Tom, just saw your interview in the Denver Post about the foundation. Helen would be so proud of everything you've accomplished." Marcus was right. My grandmother had intended her money to help me become a doctor, but her true legacy was much larger than that. Through the foundation that bore her name, her investment in my education was becoming an investment in dozens of other students whose families had tried to sabotage their dreams. As I reached my apartment building, I looked back at the medical school campus where I spent my days learning to heal others. The building's windows glowed with warm light, each one representing someone pursuing knowledge and dedicating their life to service. I thought about Maria Santos beginning her own medical journey in New Mexico. I thought about my parents slowly learning to understand the damage they had caused and working to become better people. I thought about Jessica breaking generational patterns of dysfunction and building healthier relationships. I thought about the 17 other families whose crimes had been exposed because I had found the courage to report mine. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is refuse to accept limitation imposed by people who don't understand our potential. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give the world is the courage to become exactly who we're meant to be, regardless of who that threatens or challenges. My grandmother Helen had believed I could become a doctor when no one else did. Now I was proving her right while helping others prove their own families wrong. Her love had been stronger than my parents' fear, and her investment in my future was paying dividends far beyond anything she could have imagined. Standing in front of my apartment building, looking up at the Colorado stars that had witnessed my journey from broken dreams to renewed hope, I felt profound gratitude for the difficult path that had led me to this moment of clarity and purpose. I was exactly where I belonged, doing exactly what I was meant to do, surrounded by people who celebrated growth instead of fearing it. My parents had tried to keep me small, but love and truth had proven stronger than fear and control. As I climbed the stairs to my apartment, I smiled, thinking about tomorrow's anatomy exam, the study group meeting I would lead for struggling first-year students, and the foundation board meeting where we would review applications from 15 more students whose families were trying to sabotage their academic dreams. Each day brought new opportunities to transform personal pain into collective healing, to turn family betrayal into broader justice, and to prove that love really could triumph over fear when people found the courage to choose growth over comfort. That was the lesson my parents had never learned, but that I would spend my life teaching the people who truly love us, want us to become our fullest selves, even when that growth takes us beyond the limits of their own imagination. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is refuse to let other people's fears become our limitations. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give the world is the example of someone who chose to flourish despite every attempt to make them smaller. Have you ever had someone in your life try to sabotage your dreams because they were threatened by your potential? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below about how we can support each other in pursuing our goals, even when the people closest to us don't understand them. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more true stories about overcoming family dysfunction and finding the courage to pursue your authentic path in life. Share this with someone who might need to hear that their dreams are valid regardless of what their family thinks. Thank you for listening to my story and for supporting the belief that everyone deserves the chance to become their best self, surrounded by people who celebrate their growth rather than fear it. Until next time, remember that your potential is not limited by other people's understanding of it.